Sorry about this. I had started this announcement and realized I didn't have the recording on yet. After we get back from spring break, and sorry about the bad news, folks, that next week is spring break. Sorry about that. Okay. But get over it. All right. But after spring break, the Wednesday after spring break, that's April the 4th, there will be 2 informational sessions on institutional scholarships and summer Pell. Okay? That'll be Wednesday, April the 4th. The first one will be 11 to 1, and the second one will be 5 to 6:30 in the evening. Okay? You can go to either or both, it doesn't matter. On this campus, it'll be in the faculty staff dining room. Now, let me show you the best way to get there, I think, but there's many ways to get there. If you go out of the door here, out into this long hallway down here, don't go to the first exit down. That goes sort of to the bookstore area. Go to the second stairwell and only go to that first flight. The first, not a whole floor, but just that first flight. And then go toward the cafeteria. Before you get to the cafeteria, on the left is the faculty staff dining room. The cafeteria is right over here. Faculty staff dining room is right there. It's across from what I think they call the student lounge or something like that, and some other nursing classrooms and things. That's where both informational sessions will be on this campus. Now, if any of you happen to be on the Birmingham campus Wednesday and not on this campus, they also have it there in the Leon Kennedy Center. That's where the cafeteria is, in the cafeteria, which I found pretty interesting because this is right over lunch hour. Faculty staff dining room, hardly anyone uses that. I don't know of any faculty that go in there to eat. They may, but it's not a big deal. But over there, lots of people eat lunch at Wednesdays between 11 and 1, but I'm sure they're going to just section off a part of it. Okay? And then even in the evening, 5 to 6:30, I bet you that's when the residence hall people eat supper, but that's a much smaller crowd. But anyway, this is all sponsored by the Office of Student Financial Services. It's a great opportunity if any of you are Pell students. I know a lot of you are graduating, but if any of you are Pell students and are coming back next year, get your FAFSA in soon, very soon. If it's in and approved by summertime, you can start using Pell Grant money for next year. You can start using it in the summer. Great opportunity to take advantage of. Any new people come in since I called roll? Okay. Now, next thing I want to talk about is the schedule for today. We're going to start in chapter 3, and I'm pretty sure that we will get enough done in chapter 3 to be ready for the lab. And we'll only go until 3:15. Okay, and then we'll start the lab at 3:15. And today's lab, I think you'll find, is fairly short and probably pretty much fun. Okay, you'll be scattered all over the building. You won't be in a lab, but we'll talk about that later. And then, as soon as you're through with the lab, I can give you a test. And as soon as you're finished with the test, you can Okay. Not that. This. Okay. All right. And here's Shanika. Okay. But that way, maybe you can start spring break a little early. Okay? All right. No, you wouldn't want to do that? Nah. Okay. You can go to work. Okay. You can do homework. Okay. Give you some free time. Okay. Any, okay. I had a note in my thing, slide 3, but we haven't even started chapter 3 yet. So, any questions before we get started today? All right. Then, now, especially any questions on chapter 2. That's what the test is over, and that will be the last 30 minutes today, whenever that last 30 minutes is. No later than that.
On that test.
Second?
Will there be any vocabulary stuff on that test?
I don't know how to answer that. There's multiple choice, and multiple choice may have, you have to pick out the right word, so in that sense, but none per se. I don't really do that much of that. But it won't be as many problems. It'll be a lot, no, y'all have had, this is the second test. it won't be as many problems as first. It's going to be mostly multiple choice. Okay? A few, maybe, okay, that may be what you mean. Fill in the blank.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Maybe one or two, I don't remember for sure. And, let me look. Okay. It looks like to me at least two questions, as in, or maybe three calculations, and all the rest are just matching. I mean, multiple choice. Okay? So I don't think there's any just fill in the blank. I understand now what you're saying about okay. All right. No questions? All right. Then let's get started with energy. Chapter 2 talks about motion, forces, momentum. And while I'm thinking of it, I just realized when I looked at you, is it the projectile motion lab that you need? Okay. I know it's in here somewhere. There's one. Okay. Anyone else need the last lab? Okay. So, we talked about motion, velocities, accelerations, displacement, distance, forces, momentum, impulse, all that kind of stuff. Okay? Now, many of those, displacement, velocity, acceleration, forces, momentum, impulse actually too, are all vector quantities. Direction matters. Okay? Some of them are just scalar quantities, like distance, speed. That's about it. All the rest of them, really, direction was involved. In this chapter, we're talking about energy. Now, the energy approach is very similar to the force approach, with the big difference being energy is a scalar quantity. No direction associated with it. Okay? Now, you can't have plus energy or negative energy, positive or negative, but energy is just a scalar quantity. So in many ways, it's a lot easier to fiddle with. On the other hand, it has its drawbacks too. Here's the core concept here. This is on page 62 if you got the current edition of the book. Energy is transformed through working or heating, and the total amount of energy remains constant. Okay? That means big picture total amount of energy. Here's the problem. Okay? Well, it's right here, but they don't make a big deal about it. Can be transformed. Okay? Now here's a picture of a dam. I don't remember which dam this is. Glen Canyon Dam on the Colorado River between Utah and Arizona. About 710 feet wall of concrete holds Lake Powell behind it, which is 170 meters deep. That's about 560 feet deep when the dam is full. Water falls about 5 meters or 15 foot diameter penstocks to generators at the bottom of the dam. So, what you have here is this dam is backing up the water. On that side of the dam, there's a lake, okay, Lake Powell, and it's around some level like this, okay. Here, the water is way down here, okay. And what they're doing is backing up the water. The dam is holding, the water is backing up, and then the water is falling, and that falling water, you're changing the energy. First, the dam, by backing up the water, is increasing, and we'll get these terms later, gravitational potential energy of the water. And then when the water is allowed to fall through the pipes, that's giving it kinetic energy, energy of motion. That energy of motion hits the turbines, spins the turbines. That's another form of mechanical energy or kinetic energy, rotational kinetic energy. The spinning turbines then, you turn around and that makes electricity, okay? Because you have a generator in there, and that changes the energy of motion, kinetic energy, into electrical potential energy, okay? electrical potential energy are sent through the wires and the cables and the microwaves or whatever, however it's sent, and then it comes to our houses. We use it for light, we use it for heating, we use it for running our computers, we use it for just about everything, okay? Maybe even if any of you have electric cars, for plugging in your cars and then you use it to move yourself around. So you see we have energy all over the place. But we transfer the energy from gravitational potential energy to kinetic energy to electrical energy to all kinds of energy. And some of that could be stored in a battery. That's chemical potential energy. So there's all different forms. Energy is transformed, and then there's various things by doing work or by heating. Okay? We'll talk about those too. We didn't even mention any of those yet, except I said heating your house maybe. Okay. So here's the fundamental law here, conservation of energy. Now, before we get there, energy is manifested through all these ways. Work is a form of energy. Motion is a form of energy. Position is a form of energy. Radiation is a form of energy, as in light, but not just light. Nuclear radiation, all sorts of radiation. Heat is a type of radiation itself. That's a form of energy. Chemical, I mentioned that, stored chemical potential energy in a battery. Nuclear energy, I was mentioning that here, but nuclear energy. Mass itself is energy. Now, that last one's a little bizarre, isn't it? We talked about mass being conserved itself, but actually mass is a form of energy. Whose famous equation related mass to energy? Anyone know? You all know the equation, whether you realize it or not. It has energy on one side, and over here it has mass, among other things, on the other side. And it's a really simple equation. Say again? Albert Einstein was the person, and what was his formula? E is equal to mc squared, exactly. This is mass itself. Well, let me get my pen working. E is equal to mc squared. Okay, I know what E is, energy. I know what M is, mass. What in the world is C? Besides yes in Spanish, okay? Say again?
Chemical.
No. It's far. Okay. C is the speed of light. Did you know light had a speed? Yes, it does. It's pretty fast, okay? In fact, it's 186,000 miles in a second, okay? 186,000 miles in a second. That means that if you had light going around the diameter of the Earth, the circumference of the Earth, it would go 4.5 times around, let's see, how to say that? It goes 4.5 times around in a second, okay? That's how, it is fast, okay? Really, really fast. We think it's instantaneous. It's not quite. It's very, very fast, okay? So, that C is the speed of light, a enormously large number. And then you square it, and it becomes even larger. So just a tiny amount of mass here becomes an enormous amount of energy. And where do we see that being manifested? The nuclear energy, okay? The bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki illustrated just how powerful those were. And in those bombs, very small amount of mass became energy, and that was enough to basically vaporize a bunch of people. Lots of people were killed otherwise, but some of them, literally, some of them, all that was left was the shadow of them. They happened to be walking by someplace when it went off, and the wall behind them got exposed. They literally were vaporized. It's that much heat and just left their outline on the wall. It's scary. And I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of people one bomb destroyed. Let's hope we never do that again. Okay. And it was just a small amount of energy, mass, that made all that much energy. Now, what are some of the sources? Well, we know in our automobiles, mostly petroleum and all the petroleum products, so that would be heating oils and various things like that. Coal is another hydrocarbon source of energy. And both of those come from what? Where do they get their energy?
Fossil fuels.
Second, fossil fuels, exactly. Now, what do we mean by that? Second?
Burning.
Okay, yeah, that's how we release it. But what do we mean by fossils? Second? Dead? Yes, okay. More plant than animal, but could be animals in there too. In fact, there definitely are some, okay, in a strange sense, probably not the way you're thinking. But it was, let me start over. It all came from the sun. What are these little green leaves doing out there right now? Not this tree doesn't have many, but a few of them do on the ground. Is what?
Absorbing the sunlight.
They do absorbing sunlight. What they're doing with it? They are storing the energy. The energy from the sunlight. Remember this radiation from light. And those green leaves, grass leaves, tree leaves, any kind of green plant leaves. There is a little cells called chlorophyll. Okay? Now this chlorophyll is sort of a complex kind of thing. It's kind of like a claw. And in the middle of the claw is holding a magnesium ion. Okay? And without going into all of it, that claw somehow, using that magnesium ion, is capturing energy from the sun, and it's using a process, ADP and ATP. Okay, those two phosphate minerals are organic compounds, and they go from one to another, and storing the energy from the sun in those bonds. That is used to combine carbon dioxide it gets out of the air and water it gets from its roots. Carbon dioxide and water combining together to form carbohydrates, simple sugars. Glucose, sucrose, fructose, some type of sugar, and then the plant processes those, uses it, stores it, whatever. But anyway, all those plant parts, including the wood, are made from carbonaceous materials. More complicated hydrocarbons, you might say, and carbohydrates. Cellulose is a very complicated carbohydrate with calcium in it to give it rigidity, and that's what allows the trees to stand, or the grass, or whatever to stand. So the sun, energy from the sun, is forming those things. Well, the tree dies, okay? And lots of trees die, especially in swampy areas where lots of trees are growing, and animals do. And as they die, they fall down in the swampy areas, and they don't oxidize away. Now, most of the, okay, I don't have it up here with me. How long are you on campus today? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Okay. Okay, I told you I had class starting at 1:15. That's it. Okay. I'm going to pause this and run get the test for you. Sorry, folks. All right. So, the plant materials, especially if it was in a swampy area, went down there. Now, the reason I say swampy area, that means the stuff was not allowed to expose to oxygen. Now, when they mow the grass out here or do whatever, then generally that stuff is exposed to oxygen and it oxidizes away. Okay? It's the carbohydrates combine with oxygen and become carbon dioxide again, and go back into making water. But when it falls into a swampy area where it can't oxidize away, then it piles up and piles up and piles up and piles up, and after a long time, and you have microbial action. That's why I was laughing at animal parts, because microbes are more animal than they're plants. They're eating up that material too, but they're not oxidizing it. They are putting it into other forms that will be ultimately become, and we'll go over this later in this chapter, become other material, and then ultimately some of that becomes coal, some of it becomes petroleum, some of it becomes natural gas. But it takes literally thousands of years for that process to work. And guess what we're doing right now? Burning it at a rate way faster than we're making it. And it's going to be thousands of years before any swamps that are currently here going to make any petroleum products or coal. So we're using stuff that was done millennia ago, and using them up like crazy. That's one of the problems with fossil fuels. There's only a limited amount of them, maybe a lot, but it's only a limited amount, and we're using them far faster than they're being made. So those are both from fossil fuels. Moving water, like we saw behind the dam, that's a good source of clean, renewable energy. We'll talk about its problems too later. Nuclear, okay? Again, very little mass is needed to make an awful lot of energy. We don't want it happening in bombs, obviously, anymore, but we can control it in power plants, submarines, aircraft carriers. There are all sorts of places that we can use nuclear energy. I think I already marked you here. Yeah, Gary's here. Thank you. And there are some problems with nuclear energy as well. We'll get to those. It's clean in the sense it doesn't produce greenhouse gases, okay? But there are some dirty features about it. Solar, on the other hand, that's where it all comes from anyway, except nuclear. Nuclear is there on its own. But even the moving water actually got its energy from the sun. We'll go over that too. But the solar, using that directly, that's a pretty good way of getting it. There's some problems with that though too, and we'll talk about those as well. Okay? Now, what are some of the uses for these various forms of energy? Well, the first one that comes to most of your minds are transportation. Okay? Automobiles, buses, aircraft, ships, everything uses. Now, I mentioned some naval vessels do use nuclear power, but most of them are still powered by petroleum products. Okay? We also use a whole lot of that energy in generating electricity. Okay? Now you might say, but we're coming out with electric cars, folks, so we're not going to be using the fossil fuels anymore. Except, where do you get the electricity? From burning fossil fuels. Now some of it is done from the moving water, sure, and we'll see later, maybe 3%. Most of it's from fossil fuels. Okay? So even though we are going to cleaner cars, the production of the energy for those cars is still fossil fuels. Now they may be able to do that more cleanly than they can run an internal combustion engine. We do our heating, and we do some of this certainly down here, but up north, lots of heating done by fossil fuels. Cooling, that's where we use that, mostly from electricity, but that came from fossil fuels. And lighting, everybody uses lighting and other things too. Power lifts and things like this, anything that Just about anything you use is using some form of these energies. So let's go back to the concept of work. This is 3.1. Okay.
That was the wrong one.
Oh, second.
That was the wrong one.
Oh, this was the one you needed?
The one I had just turned in.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I said the projectile motion one. The laws of motion. Now, there's very little verbiage on here. It's just doing the work. And you'll need to either listen to YouTube video or get someone 2 pages there. Okay. All right. Talking about work. Work is one of the forms of using energy. Let me put it that way. Work is a product. Now, that doesn't mean a product like a byproduct or things like this. That literally means a mathematical product of the applied force, that's a multiplication of the applied force times the parallel distance through which the force acts. Now wait a minute, I thought I just said that work and energy was scalar quantity, but force is a vector quantity, right? So how do you get a scalar out of a vector? Well, notice here it says the parallel distance through which the force acts. Well, parallel indeed is suggesting that there's direction to things. Otherwise, who cares whether it's parallel or not? So here's what they're meaning by that. Okay? Now, I know y'all probably haven't had vectors. Most of you. Oh, by the way, I know Josh came in, because I passed him in the hall when I was getting the test for that other student. Is anyone else come in since I called roll? Okay, I already had Gary, so okay, no new people. Okay. Now, you probably don't have very much vector mathematics in your background. So let me tell you this about vectors. Basically, 3 ways we can multiply with a vector. One is a simple way. If you have a vector here and you're multiplying a number by that, say by 3, that makes the vector 3 times as long, but in the same direction. Okay? You call that scalar multiplication. Okay? We're not doing that here. There's 2 types when you actually multiply vector times vector. This is one of those. When you multiply a vector like a force, and I'm going to push on this chair. Okay? I'm pushing this way. But which way is the chair moving? That way. My force is down here, but the chair is moving that way. Okay? Now, my whole force is not making that chair move. Part of my force has nothing to do with the motion of the chair. And that part of the force is the perpendicular part. See, this vector here can be resolved into a vertical component and a horizontal component. The vertical component is doing no work whatsoever in this problem. Only the horizontal component, and that's moving the chair, that horizontal component parallel to the distance through which the force acts. In other words, in the direction of the motion of the chair, that's the only part that's doing work. Right? Remember when I was talking about pulling on the pine tree? You know, the components of the force, did I tell y'all that? Okay. The components of the force in the direction that it wound up falling, those were doing work. The components of the force like this were not doing any work. They were just keeping us from getting landed on, okay? So it's only the force in the direction in which the motion occurs that's contributing to work, okay? Now we do the formula pretty simply. Work is equal to force times distance. And that's about all you really need to know, just that the force in the direction of the displacement or the displacement in the direction of the force, whichever you want to call it, usually the component of the force in the direction of the displacement. They work out being the same thing. That produces work. Now remember we were in the last chapter, little w was weight, capital W is work. These are the parameters here. Capital F is force, D is displacement or distance. Now this guy here, what's he doing? He's lifting a box and he's doing work because he's lifting in the same direction that the motion is. Now how much is he having to lift? Whatever that box weighs. He's having to exert that much force to get it to move upwards, times the distance over which it does. That's how much work he's doing. Now, so if I lift the chair, I'm doing the weight of the chair times whatever distance I have to move it. If I'm got the chair up here and I'm carrying it this way, am I doing any work on the chair? Not really, because the weight of the chair is going to the center of the earth. My motion is, and its motion is perpendicular. No work is being done. Okay, remember we talked about digging the patio, right? I told you that story too. The hauling the soil away from the patio, not really doing much work. Okay, a little bit of work over resistance, but that's all. No, the lifting, yeah, that was work. Okay, but the horizontal, not as much work. Okay, so if you're dealing with the U.S. customary system, what's the measure of the unit of force? Pounds, and your distance is usually measured in feet, foot-pounds. So work is foot-pounds. Okay, over here in the metric, what is your unit of force? Newtons. And your unit of distance? Say again? I can't hear you. Meters. So a Newton meter, and we have a special name for a Newton meter, that's a joule. Okay? Now that's not the joule like a diamond or something like that, it's the Joule. And that is named after James Prescott Joule, who did a lot of the early work with work, okay, and energy transfer. So when you use abbreviation, what abbreviation do you think that would be? Capital J, because it's named after James Prescott Joule. The funny thing is, when they spell out their names, Newtons and joules, they put lowercase. To me, they ought to capitalize those too, but they don't. They only capitalize the unit, the abbreviation for the unit. Of course, pounds and feet are not named after anybody, so those are just foot pounds. Okay. Now, I bet you some of you have operated some equipment before that gave you foot-pounds as an answer. Haven't you? Would that be a torque wrench? Are you doing work with a torque wrench? Yeah. Not really. You maybe think you're doing work, but the torque wrench is something different. Here's the torque wrench here. You can also call it a cheater bar, right? Okay, but the torque wrench actually has a scale on it, for those of you who thought. And what you're doing, you're pushing in this direction, but the reaction is this way, okay? Your distance from the nut, the bolt, whatever you're trying to loosen with the torque wrench, your force is this way, your displacement is that way. That's perpendicular. That's not parallel, okay? And guess what? What does that actually produce? What did I say the name of the wrench was? Torque wrench. Torque is what you get out of that when the motion and the direction are perpendicular to each other, and torque is a vector quantity, not a scalar quantity. So that's the other form of multiplying vectors. You have what they call dot product, and just like in regular math, you can represent the multiplication of two things by F dot D, center dot, That's called the dot product. That produces a scalar. Even though force is a vector, displacement is a vector, you get a scalar answer, and that's work. Okay? But when you multiply force with a cross product times displacement, and they're not parallel to each other, that gives you torque, and torque is a vector quantity. Okay? They have the same units, foot-pounds. Force times displacement, foot-pounds. Okay? Now, they don't use joules, I don't think. They just use, I don't know, what does a metric torque wrench, what do they measure that in? Is there a scale for it? What's that? Newton meters?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, okay. That would be Newton meters. And they don't call it a joule, they call it a Newton meter, okay? Or they call it Travis. I don't know which they call it, okay? The Travis is here. Okay. So, yeah. So that makes sense. They would call that Newton meters, and they call parallel work force times direction, times direction would be a displacement. We would call it joule because that is a form of energy or work, not torque. Okay, so Newton meter, that would be very reasonable to do there. Okay, but this guy's doing work on the box because force due to gravity is downward. He's working against that force, moving the box upward. The force times the displacement, that would be the work he's doing. And that goes back to the concept of me twisting and turning and pushing and sweating and grunting and doing other sorts of noises when I'm trying to move that rock. How much work was I doing? Say again? No, I wasn't. Was I moving the rock? No. Okay. I could grunt and just exert lots and lots of force on the rock, but if I didn't move the rock, I'm not doing a bit of work on it. Okay? Force times displacement. You got to have both. I had lots of force, it's just no displacement. Okay? So doing no work. So the units of work, we just talked about these. In the in the metric system or the SI system, we have Brandon and we have JJ. Didn't know they were SI, did you? Okay. Brandon and JJ. All right. All right. Anyone else come in since I called roll? Okay. And in the U.S. customary, it's just foot-pounds. Okay. We use those same units for torque and work. Okay. But if I don't move the rock or whatever you're pushing on or pulling on, that could be a force. That could be a huge force. But if it has no distance, you're doing no work. Now, I don't know, one of the books I pulled from had a picture. I don't know, they used to, a while back, they may still have some of these, sort of, I want to say dorky little shows, but I guess I shouldn't say that, about the cheerleader competitions, right? And those cheerleaders would form huge pyramids of people, you know. The lightest one on top, the guys or the gals on the bottom having to hold them up. Okay, now to get the person up there, yeah, they were doing work. But to hold them there for those 10 seconds, 15, whatever they needed to do to get the point, were they doing any work? They were exerting a lot of force, but since they weren't moving them anywhere, zero work. You have to have a displacement to have work in the physics sense, okay? Tell me I wasn't working out there digging on that rock. You would have had an argument on your hand. But in physics sense, no work. And displacement perpendicular to applied work still has no work. Okay? We talked about this before too some. The Earth is moving around the sun, right? The reason we're moving around the sun is the gravity of the sun is pulling us to it all the time, but we're moving this way. Our force is this way, our displacement is that way, perpendicular. How much work is the sun doing on us? Zero. Exactly. Sending lots of energy our way, but no work in that sense. Okay, Alexis, right? Okay. Okay. So displacement perpendicular to the applied work, force, still no work. No displacement at all, no work. So an awful lot of ways of doing no work, as y'all know. I mean, no, I wouldn't say that. Okay. So here, if I take a book out of the second shelf here and move it to the top shelf, have I done work on the book? Yes, of course, because it's in the gravitational field of the Earth, the weight is pulling it downward, I exerted a force against that. That force was the weight of the book, and moved it up a certain distance. Yes, I did work. Work is equal force times displacement. If I take the book and move it over to this end of the shelf, have I done any work on the book? No. Huh? Because I'm not working against the force due to gravity. That's perpendicular to it, right? Okay? My displacement is perpendicular to the weight of the book. Okay? So in a sense, I did no work on the book. Now, if I slid the book across the shelf here, there was a friction there. Yeah, I was doing a little bit of work against friction. But that's not the same as this. So force times the displacement. Because friction is always in the opposite direction of motion, so it's in the same direction. Okay. And that's all they say about that. Okay. I think we're just about ready for example 3.1. Okay? How much work, so we're looking for work, capital W, what is little w? Weight. Okay, that's not what we're talking about here. Weight is a force, by the way, which makes it a vector quantity. Work is a scalar quantity. How much work is needed, so this is the unknown, this is what we're going to be looking for. How much work is needed to lift a 5 kilogram backpack, 5 kilogram, is that 5.0? Yeah, 5.0 kilogram. Let me clean that up a little bit. Okay. 5.0 kilogram backpack. What's that a measure of? Mass, not weight, mass. To lift a 5 kilogram backpack to a shelf 1 meter above the floor. So the 1.0 meters, that's your displacement. And that's vertical. It says above the floor, so therefore it's going upward. Do you think you're doing any work? Yes. Okay. How much? How can we calculate the work?
Use that formula that says.
And what is that formula?
Was it mass equal weight over distance? Or?
Work is equal to.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the other. Wait for. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. You're absolutely right. We're looking for little w first, weight, and what is that? Mass. Okay, what is? Yeah, force is a what? Mass times what? Always. Second? Okay, it's acceleration due to gravity, mg. Your weight is always mg. Force is always a mass times the acceleration. Okay? So whatever weight is the acceleration due to gravity. So we know the mass, that's 5.0 kilograms. Okay? Times g, what's g? 9.8. What units? Meters per, what do you say? Squared. Okay. Meters per second would be a velocity or a speed. Meters per second squared is an acceleration. Know your units. They can be your friends. They will help you from making some really dumb mistakes. And does anyone know what that comes out being? It will come out being newtons, because a kilogram meter per second squared is a newton, but what the amount would be. I think it's 44 newtons, right? 49, I'm sorry, 49 knew that. Okay, 49 newtons. Okay? Okay. 49 newtons on the nose. So now we know the weight, which is a what? What's Newton measure?
Kilograms
right? And what is that a measure of? Force. So that's your force. Up here, your work is, what's that formula? Force times displacement. As long as it's in the same direction, your weight is downward, your displacement's upward. Yes, they're in the same direction. So what would this be? This is your force. Force due to weight, huh? It'd be 49 newtons times 1.0 meter, which makes the multiplication really easy. Say again? Newton meter, Newton meter. Or, what's a Newton meter? A joule, okay. Or 49 joules. Okay, does that make sense? A Newton meter is a joule. Which, what would be the fundamental units of a joule then? And of energy in general, or work in general. Kilogram, meter per second squared, times meter would be a kilogram meter squared per second squared, right? So that's going to be your unit for energy or work. Kilogram meter squared per second squared, which is in joules. Or in the U.S. customary, foot pounds. Okay? All right, good deal. That was 3.1. They also have 3.2 here, okay? And that has nothing to do with 3.1, or not much, but anything that has to do with it, I wouldn't mind you having to go through again. How much work? So again, work is the unknown here. Is required to lift a 50-pound box. Okay, what's that a measure of? Weight. This is the force. Now that's a little w, weight, that is a force, so you can call it F sub G or F sub W, whatever you want to call it. I'm teaching a physics course on Monday, Wednesday evening, and they use F sub W. This book uses, when they use it, F sub G. I wish they'd make up their mind, but yeah. So this is already a weight or a force. And you're doing that vertically at a distance of 2 feet. So what's that a measure of? 2 feet is a measure of distance. Then work is? What is work?
Work is,
Your formula.
Work is force
Times the displacement. Your force here was 50 pounds, and your displacement was 2 feet, and that gives you how much work? 100, and we usually put it as foot-pounds. 100 foot-pounds of work. U.S. customary doesn't have a special unit for work or energy. We just give it the compound name, foot-pounds. Feet times pounds. Pounds times feet. Okay, 100 foot-pounds. Got it. Okay, any questions on work? All right. Now there's a little blurb here on simple machines. And you'll need to turn in your text to pages 66 and 67. Big spread there under a closer look about some of these simple machines. Then we're going to come back and deal with power. So we're going to flip back a bit. But here is a simple machines. The basic premise for all these simple machines is the work in equals the work out. Okay? That's not a workout like, no, that's not that. Okay. And have any of you ever lifted a car? Yay or no? I bet you some of you have.
friends, not by myself.
Say again?
With some friends, not by myself.
Oh, I bet you could do it by yourself.
You talking about, yeah, you live, but you barely move. I mean, you barely live, but it's still live.
Get it off the ground?
With the machine,
Okay. Have you ever operated a car jack?
Yeah, with that.
Oh, yeah! What were you doing? Lifting the car with how many friends? None, okay? You were using a simple machine. Okay? That's called, by the way, a lever. Okay? And you can lift a car any of you can lift a car, okay? If you have a long enough lever and willing to work at it enough, okay? The work in equals the work out. But the thing is, think about this when you're jacking up that car, okay? You're doing this kind of stuff. You're exerting a force here. How much force? Just name the force. Huh?
10 pounds.
Say how many pounds?
We'll say 10.
20 pounds?
20 pounds.
20 pounds. Is that what you said? Whatever you say. What did you say? 40 pounds?
I said 10. But
10
that
pounds.
sounds
Okay, it doesn't matter. Just pick any force. 20 pounds, okay? So I'm doing 20 pounds and doing, let's say I'm doing a foot every time I do this. How high is the car coming up? Fractions of an inch. But it weighs a lot more.
Yeah.
So my work in is 20 pounds times a foot, and its work out would be, what's the car weigh, a ton? Okay, times a very small fraction of an inch, still comes out being 20 foot-pounds. Work in equals work out. In reality, it never does, but theoretically, that's what it is. Now, the force is multiplied by a ratio of the distances. My distance ratio was 1 foot here to a fraction of an inch there. That's a pretty big work ratio. So therefore the force, my 20 pounds, is multiplied and can lift a 1 ton car. Okay? So that force multiplied by the ratio of the distance. So, see, these others you may not think of as machines, but they are. If I told you to take a heavy tool chest and put it on the back of your truck, can you do that by yourself? I mean a really heavy tool chest. What are you typically going to do? Get you a ramp and roll it up there. You can't lift it if it weighs, let's say, y'all have any tool chests that weigh a whole lot that you can't lift? I bet so. But if it's on wheels and you roll it up a ramp, you can do that, can't you? Okay? That's because that's an inclined plane. The distance you're moving it is a lot further than the height that it's doing. So therefore you have a force multiplier. The ratio of your distance to the distance it's moving up is big, so therefore you can exert a little force and move that big heavy tool chest. Okay? Now, did anyone think of an example of a wedge? Not a wedgie. I don't want to see that. Okay. Never mind. Okay. A wedge. Say again?
Busted wood.
Yes. Okay. How about a wedge, a maul, what do you call that thing that you use? That's exactly what I was thinking of too. Can any of you pull apart a big dry thing of oak? No, I can't either. I wouldn't even try. But yes, you can if you have a wedge. And really what a wedge is two inclined planes together, and you're getting a huge force down when you pound on that thing, and it's pushing out a little bit this way. Force multiplier, because your hammer is coming, or your axe or your maul is coming down a long distance with a fair amount of force, but you're pushing that apart a very small amount, but with a much bigger force. So that wood holds it really tight. Same thing, the energy from that sunlight, making that carbohydrates from the thing. Is a screw a simple machine? This is talk about the little threaded thing. No, okay, don't. Nasty minds, okay. Okay. All right. What have we talked about there? Really, a screw is a inclined plane wrapped around an axle. Isn't it? That's exactly what it is. So you can, okay, you can fasten two things together with a screw much tighter than you can with a nail. A nail is only holding by friction. A screw is holding much tighter than a nail would, right? Okay? That's an inclined plane wrapped around an axle. And then lever, we've already sort of talked about that. when I finally was able to move that rock that I'd been digging around, not much, but just a little bit, what I did, I had my pick, I think it was, and got the point of it kind of underneath, got most of it dug out. This is when I was digging the patio, remember that? Okay. And got that under there, and I then got a metal rod and a pipe and put over the handle of the pick and pulled with all my might this way, barely moved that. Well, what I was using, a lever. I was moving as much force as I could do, let's say 200 pounds of force. I was hanging on it almost, okay, 200 pounds of force this way, moving a fair distance this way, and that then was picking up with the point of the pick the rock maybe that far. Huge amount of force here. The force multiplier was my distance to ratio of my distance to that distance. That's what a lever is. Okay? Who was one of the early scientists that came up with the idea of lever and sort of described it mathematically? He was really one of the earliest great mathematicians and scientists, engineers, I mean, you name it. Same guy that, no, before Newton, way before Newton. This is BC, way back there. Same guy that was in the baths when he realized how to, not Aristotle, Archimedes. Archimedes. Same guy who did this guy was, 200, 300, 400 years BC, way back there, and he did so many incredible things. But he described and talked about the lever. He actually had a phrase. He said, "Give me a fulcrum to put under it and a long enough pole and I could move the earth." Okay? Of course, there's nothing to put it under, but his principle was there. You know, if you have a long enough lever and a fulcrum that you could do under, yeah, you could move just about anything. If it was long enough and, you know, your force multiplier was the ratio of those distances. Now, he did other things too, pretty incredible things. If I say the word auger, what comes to mind? Okay, that's basically a screw that you're going to pull things up, right? You know the earlier name for that? Archimedes screw. He developed the auger we still use today, okay? Now, when I was young, my father was a farmer, and we worked on the farm, did all sorts of things. And when he was harvesting his grain, he had the combine that did the grain, and then got the grain up into the bin, and basically used augers to get it up there. And then we drive the truck next to it when the bin was full up there, and the auger would fill it into the truck. And then we drive the truck to the grain bin and have an auger there, Archimedes screw, and it did it up to the top of the grain bin and it piled it into there. We were using Archimedes, really up-to-date modern technology, right? We were using something developed by a guy with 200, 300 BC. I mean, still, there's not many things that are much better. So he did that. That's not one of these things. Oh, it's sort of like a screw, really. Archimedes screw is what it's called. He lived on a really small island. Let me see if I can remember what it was. Syracuse, maybe? I think that's right. And the king just really loved him because he could do all sorts of things. The other bigger countries would come to attack him, and they came by ship. And Archimedes figured out a way to, up on the top of the hills there, set up a lens or a mirror, I don't remember which, maybe both, and aim it toward the ship, get the sunlight from the sun, aim it toward the ship, and into a pinpoint, set the ships on fire. Okay, literally one man wiped out a lot of ships in the fleet. They went home. It wasn't worth it, okay? One guy. He also, I think, was the one who invented the catapult, okay? So just a few people could be up here on the thing throwing rocks at the ship, breaking holes in the deck, because they were all wooden ships back then. Incredible what that guy came up with, okay? And when finally he was defeated, I think by the Romans, whoever that king was, the Roman soldiers had broken through, and Archimedes was trying to solve some problem, working on the ground, writing out things in the sand, and they came up and ordered him to get up and remember, they're going to arrest him or put him in thing, and they killed him because of that. The Roman centurion or whoever was in charge knew about him, and he had said, make sure he doesn't get harmed. That guy that killed him because he ignored his orders, he got, sort of lost his head over it. Okay. But that was Archimedes. Sorry he died of it. Okay. A wheel and axle. We use those a lot, don't we? Okay. That is a simple machine. If you think about it, the wheel is big like this. The axle is like this. You're turning the axle, and the distance it turns, actually around here, is pretty small compared to this. So you have a big mechanical advantage with the force multiplied by the ratio of distance. And a pulley. Now, some pulleys are simple machines and others are not. If it's just a pulley that you attach to your bag here and you have hanging from the ceiling, you're doing this, that's not really a force multiplier. If you pull 1 foot here, lift that 1 foot. That's not really a force multiplier. But if it goes up, call that a block and tackle, right? Okay? Come along, you have all sorts of names for it. So if it comes up, goes down, then goes around here and back here, and you pull 2 feet and it lifts it half a foot. Because you're pulling a foot of rope here, but it has to go down and up.
It doubles the torque.
It doubles the force. Exactly. Because that's your force multiplier. And if you have twice down there, 4 times. Okay, so every time that you do another loop at the bottom, loops at the top don't contribute anything but change the direction. Every time it goes around at the bottom, you double it. Yeah, very good. So pulleys can be these simple machines. Okay, and like we said here, work in equal work out, or work is force times displacement in equal force times displacement out. And if you're contributing small force but a big distance, you can move a small distance in huge force. Okay? So yes, you can lift a car by yourself. Okay? With the proper wheel. Okay? Now, what they do with this is divide both sides by dn. Okay? Oh man. Whoops, wrong pen. Okay, divide both sides by dn. Okay, and your dn's go out here. What you have here is the force in. Actually, let's do it the other way. Sorry about that. Let's divide by d out. Okay, d out. And these two go away, and your force out then, the output force, is dn over d out. I'm abbreviating now, times the force in. So you're exerting a certain force in your multiplier, how much more your distance this was than the distance you're moving it, that is your force multiplier. So your force out can be way, way more than your force in. Okay? 2, 3, 4 times. I think I've asked this question several times. Have any of you been to McWayne Center, downtown Birmingham? That's a fun place, isn't it? There was, I don't know, I haven't been there lately. There's a rig in the part of it there. You sit on the seat and you pull on the rope, and that lifts you if you can. Well, if it's just going over the top and back down, you have to exert as much force as your weight. That's hard to do, okay? Because you're not using anything but your arms. But if it's one of those that goes around the bottom once, you only have to do half your weight. If it goes around the bottom twice, you only have to pull with quarter of your weight. And just about anyone can do that and lift yourself. Of course, you do a lot of pulling and lift yourself a very little amount. Whereas that first one, if you did pull a foot, you're going to lift yourself a foot if you had the strength to do it. But on the second one, you pull 2 feet and lift yourself 1 foot. Third one, pull 4 feet and lift yourself 1 foot. So it's a force multiplier. Distance in over distance out. That multiplies your input force to be the output force. Let's see if that's how they did it. Yes, F out is equal to that ratio, F D in to D out times F in. Okay. Here's a gal, woman, whatever. Boy, she's got skinny arms. It doesn't look like she's very strong, does it? Can she lift 300 pounds?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, by herself. Okay? And she does that by putting the fulcrum here, having the lever here, is a 2.5 foot effort distance, only a half foot resistance distance. What's that ratio? 2.5 to 0.5? What's the ratio? 5. Okay, very good. Your math is good. Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, 25 divided by 5 is 5, right? Just move the decimal 1 plus 7. Okay. So if she's pushing down with 60 pounds of force, I think she can do that, right? Pushing especially. How much can she lift? 5 times 60 is 300 pounds. Yes, this poor little gal here can lift 300 pounds with a long enough lever and a fulcrum to put under it that she can do it. Okay. Make sense? All right. Good deal. Now, we also call that force multiplier. We call that the mechanical advantage, and they have that in the box. This slide doesn't show that, but that's mechanical advantage. So let's go back to that. And this force multiplier here that we were talking about here is also called the mechanical advantage. And you see that talked about some too. All right, now they do show, and let me just go over these quickly. If you had moved this fulcrum to the middle here, then what did you have there? Y'all ever play with them in school? A seesaw, exactly. Okay. Now I was always generally the heaviest one in my class because I was big as a child. Everybody else passed me later. But I was the heaviest one in the grammar school, so I always had to move it over one, so I had the shorter end so we could do it, because otherwise I'd sit there and they'd be hanging in the air. Nothing would happen. Okay. Bad news there. Okay. So then you have a seesaw. You're not doing any mechanical advantage at all. You just are able to change the direction. I go down, it goes up, vice versa. Okay. Now, what if you put the fulcrum at one end and you put the effort at the other end and you have the resistance in the middle? What do we call that? I used it in the yard. Say again? Oh, someone said it? Wheelbarrow. Oh, wheelbarrow, exactly. Your fulcrum's down there. That's they call it here a second class lever. First class lever was basically your seesaw. It just changes the direction. Okay? Second class lever, you put the load in the middle, effort out here, fulcrum down there. Now I can lift twice the force here because it's only lifting that half the distance that I lift here. If I had longer handles, I could maybe do more, But generally it's about midway. Okay? The way they picture it in the book. Now, they also show a third class lever. The resistance is there, my effort is here, and now I'm making the fulcrum here. What do we call that? I use this in the yard too. Say again? Shovel, exactly, okay? Because there I'm not interested in lifting that much material. I'm just interested in moving at a large distance from down here up to there. So the mechanical advantage is against me, but I'm trying to get the advantage of the distance, not the other. So that's the third class lever. All on the top of page 67. All right, any questions on that? Okay, so let me, oops. All right, move to, we have to turn back in the book one page to get the power. This is on page 65. The rate at which work is done, rate, we've heard that before, haven't we? Anytime you see the term rate, you generally think of time rate of change. And when we were first talking about a distance, and then we talked about the time rate of change of distance, what do we call that? Distance over time? Oh, we did it in lab, second lab. You measure the distance of the ramp, you time the thing, and then you divided distance by time, and that gave you? Oh, how soon we forget. Now, I thought y'all were getting a lot out of the labs, huh?
Was it acceleration?
Not yet.
Velocity?
Yes, speed or velocity. Distance over time is speed. Displacement over time is velocity. Scalar versus vector, remember? But then the time rate of change of velocity was acceleration, because that's meters per second, meter per second squared. That's why meters per second can't be an acceleration, that's the velocity measurement. So, and then I think we did later, we talked about the time rate of change of Newton's quantity of motion, which we call momentum. Time rate of change of that produced a delta mv over t. Last part of the last chapter, that's how we define the force. Time rate of change of momentum is a force. So now we have work. So let's take the time rate of change of it. Time rate of change of doing work is power. Okay? Now we use these terms really sloppily in everyday English. Okay? And frankly, when I've taught this class before to y'all use power for anything, you know, or the other guys have. Maybe y'all are better than that, okay? But be very precise with it here, okay? Let's go back to my digging the patio. I did tell you about that, right? Okay. Now, I told you also, or did I, that I dug on that patio for about 6 to 8 weeks in the summer, the last part of the summer, because I was teaching automotive math for the first 5 weeks, so I had 5 weeks off, and then maybe, so about a month and a half, okay? Maybe not every day. It seems like it was a very dry summer. We never got any rain because the ground was really hard, but it did maybe rain a day or two, or I had to do something else a day or two. But anyway, for about a month, let's say, I dug on that patio. Ran into rocks, and that slowed it down and stuff, but I dug, and by the time that Labor Day got there, we were on the quarter system then, I'd only got about half the patio done, okay? And I was going to have to go back to school full time, so that would limit me just to what I could do on Saturdays, basically, which wasn't going to be very much, not as much as working 5 to 6 days a week on it. So we decided we had to call a bobcat, okay? Now you might say, why didn't I do that in the first place? Well, because we had no room for a bobcat. There were trees, there was a house, we didn't want to damage that any, and so I had to dig out enough area, and when I got about half of it dug, there was room now to get a bobcat in there and dig the rest of it. So we called this bobcat, this guy who advertised, the operator of that, brought in his bobcat. He dug as much in really close to half a day as it had taken me 1 month to do. We moved the same amount of soil Now, I did move it farther. I put it in the wheelbarrow and went down the hill and put it behind. I was also building retaining walls. I was doing some other things too. But he dug out as much in half a day as I had done in a month. Same amount of work though, if you don't count my extra things I did. What was the difference? The time. The time rate of change at which he was at. I guarantee you, when I was out there working in the yard, I was working at a rate of considerably less than probably a quarter of a horsepower. Okay, I'm no horse, and I was working a full day. I probably way less than a quarter of a horsepower. That Bobcat, that could easily have been 250 horsepower. Okay, I think that was a pretty good size. So his power was way more than mine. The difference was we did the same work. I did half the patio, he did half the patio. But the difference is the time rate that he was doing was much higher. His power was way bigger than mine. So here's the formula for power. Power is work divided by time. Now, in another context, we'll call this energy over time because energy is another form of work. They have the same units. So what would be the units for power? What's the unit for work? Say again?
Force times displacement.
So what's the unit?
Oh, yeah.
Foot pound.
Okay, in the U.S. customary, we call it foot-pounds, okay? And time is usually seconds. So power would be foot-pounds per second. But that's an awful lot to say. So this Scottish engineer who did a lot of the early work with this, he said, well, how much work can an average dray horse do in a day? And then the rate at which he's doing that we'll call what? The amount of work a horse can do in a day, he would measure in horsepower. Very good, okay? Horsepower. And that comes out being, on average, 550, I believe it is. It's in the book here. I believe it is. I'm not good at remembering exact numbers. Where is it? I know it's in here.
It's on your PowerPoint.
Oh, it's right there. There it is, yeah. 550 foot-pounds per second is 1 horsepower. You'll be using this in lab, by the way. 1 horsepower. So that was U.S. customary. Okay? How about metric or SI unit? What's our unit for work in the SI system? Joule, exactly. So this would be a joule per second. And what do you think they call a joule per second? What do you call a joule per second? Name, Dexter, James? What? What? Yeah. That's called a watt. That is your measure of power in the U.S. in the SI unit is a watt. Now, a joule is a very small amount of energy or work. Second's a very small amount of time. So we can measure things in watts, but that's a really small amount of power. So what do we usually use? You ever read the mechanical power of the machine that you're using? It's usually not in watts, but in, especially electrically. Second? I heard something. Kilowatts. Yeah, they use kilowatts because it's 1,000 watts. Now, so we're not going to do that much with it, but that's what we usually use. Power is equal to work divided by time. Okay. Now, and here's how they did it. If a horse is exerting or picking up a 550-pound weight, which a horse can do, I can't, with just a simple just a single pulley there, just changing the direction. He does 550 pounds lifted at 1 foot. And he does that in 1 second. That is 550 foot-pounds per second. Okay, 1 horsepower. I can't even come close to that. Okay, maybe 100, possibly a little bit more. 1 foot in a second, so maybe a little bit more. So small fraction of that, less than 1/5 of that. Okay. Now, so power is the rate at which work is done. Time rate of change of doing work. The units are SI unit, Watt. Now, that's capital W, why? Named after James Watt. Okay. He's the one that defined the horsepower, but later when the SI units came in, they honored him by naming the unit for power after him. Now, don't confuse the unit. That always has a number in front of it. 15 watts, 453 watts. That always has that's a unit. With the symbol for work, totally different thing, that's a capital W too. We just use them in various ways. But that's just a parameter, okay? A representative in an equation. Okay? Or in the U.S. customary, we often use horsepower, which is 550 foot-pounds per second. Considerably more than that. Now, the lab we're going to do today is going to be very similar to this one. Okay. You're first going to be these tired old men walking up stairs. Okay? And how much work are you doing? What's the force?
Weight.
Your weight times the vertical displacement. Not the horizontal displacement, vertical displacement. Because you're working against gravity, which is pulling down. So it's your weight times the height of the stairs. That's how much work you did. And you measure how much time it took. You'll have your stopwatches down there. And measure how much time it took you to get a certain height. And that's going to give you power, foot-pounds per second. And then we'll turn around and convert that to horsepower. We'll see how much of a horse you are. Okay. Now, then after you do that, then you go run up the stairs. You doing any more work? Not a bit more work. You're same weight with the same height. What's different though? The time, so that gives you power. You're using more power to run up the stairs than you did walking up the stairs. Okay? Same work, that didn't change. Okay? It was just whether your time was faster or slower. Okay? So that's what our lab's going to be today. Okay? That's why y'all are going to be scattered all over the building. Some of you will be at the stairwell down there, one here, one over there, one over the other. So you'll be in teams, and you'll be scattered throughout the building, going upstairs, walking first, then running. Okay? Same person. And then you'll exchange with other people. Now, ways that we use really sloppy English is when we get that bill for the electricity every month. I don't know if y'all get it, but we do. My wife does. What do we call that? The power bill. Are you paying for power? No. You're paying for energy. Okay? And how are energy and power related? Okay, very good. Because we define power as work per unit time. You can multiply both sides of the equation by time, and you get work or energy is equal to power times time. So if you've ever really paid attention to that power bill, what are you paying for? Are you paying for how many kilowatts of power you used? No. You're paying for it. Look, if you don't pay the bill, go home and ask mom or dad, whoever does pay the bill, show it to you. And you're paying for kilowatt hours. Power times time. Okay? That's what you're paying for. It's not a power bill, you're paying for the energy. Okay? It's power times time, kilowatt hours. There's another way to measure energy. Okay? So we could talk about joules, we could talk about foot-pounds, we could talk about kilowatt hours. There's tons of different ways to talk about energy. Later in the next chapter, we're going to talk about heat, and we'll talk about calories, BTUs. Oh man, there's so many ways to talk about energy. So here's one, watt hours or kilowatt hours. Okay? And before we were calling this seconds, but now we're talking about. Now, any of you have a suggestion of why they don't just call it how many joules of energy you're using? Why do they make it kilowatt hours? I'm making a guess here. I think 1 kilowatt hour is about 3.6 million joules or something like that. I don't think the power company wants you to see a number that big. That's how much you're using in a month. You're like, we got to save, folks. They want it to be a much smaller number so you don't think you're using that much energy. Okay, so kilowatt hours, that's a lot. Because a kilowatt is 1,000 joules per second. Okay, and think of how many seconds are in a month. Okay, and then think about, then you got to convert that to hours, so multiply that by 60 times 60 by 24. You're talking about a huge amount of energy. So they want to use a big unit and a small number, so you don't get as wiped out by, we use that much. Okay. So you're paying for energy in kilowatt hours. All right. Let's see. We have time to keep going. Oh, wait. I bet you we have a problem here, don't we? Okay. In your book, they have the little figure like the horse, okay, here, and then they show a guy picking up 1 Newton, which is about 1/5 of a pound, so it's a very small amount, 1 meter, that is a joule, okay? A joule is a tiny amount of energy, and if he did it in 1 second, that's no effort at all. Whereas a horse, 550 pounds, okay, that's, 2,500 or more, probably 3,000 times the amount of force lifted the same, they did a meter, we only lifted it, the horse only lifted a foot, so about 1/3 as much, but okay. But anyway, they don't have that on the slide set. Okay, but they do have example 3.3 and 4 that deal with power, so let's do them here. Okay, I'm going to clear our other writing from the slide, even though we might need it. Y'all should be able to remember it, shouldn't you? An electric lift can raise a 500 kilogram mass. Oh, they gave you what it was. 500.0 kilogram. That's your mass. A distance of 10 meters, they're telling you everything. 10.0 meters. That's going to be your distance. Okay? In 5 seconds. What's that going to be a measure of? That's your time. Okay? What is the power of the lift? That's what we're looking for. Okay? How are we going to get that? How do you get it? How do we do it? Okay, that's a good place to start. Work divided by time. Okay? We got the time. Done. That one's part. We don't have the work. How do we get work? It was a long time ago we did it. At least 15, 20 minutes.
Force times distance.
Force times the distance, okay? Force times the distance, that's work divided by time. What's the force? Do we have force given here? No, we got distance. Distance is taken care of. Got that.
Force is mass times gravity.
Ah, you got it. The force here is the force due to gravity, which is weight, which is mass times acceleration of gravity. So we got mg d over t. Well, we got m. Do we have g? You have to make an assumption here that you're on the surface of the earth, okay? You're not out in space somewhere, okay? We're here on earth, so we know g. What is it? 9.8. So let's take it and do it. The power then is equal to mass, which is 500.0 kilograms, times g, which is 9.8 meters per second squared. Don't forget your units. And your distance is 10.0 meters. Okay. Sorry, I'm running into this. And then that's all divided by 5.0 seconds. Okay. Now, I'm going to do as easy as I can. I'll divide 5 into 10, and that'll be 2. And 2 times 500 is 1,000. And 9.8 times 1,000 is 9,800. That was pretty easy math, wasn't it? Okay. And what units would that be? In the numerator, you have kilogram, meter times meter is meter squared per second squared. What's that? Kilogram, meter squared per second squared?
W.
A joule, okay. Women know their joules, okay. Okay, and then your time is second. 9,800 joules per second. What's a joule per second? A watt. Okay, what? A watt. Okay. So that would be 9,800 watts. That capital W is the unit watt as opposed to the capital W in your equation, which stood for work. Okay? Now, if you wanted a smaller number, because 9,800 is pretty big, smaller number but a bigger unit, what would you call that?
9.8 kilowatts.
Kilowatts, exactly. Okay, 9.8 kilowatts. Okay, and that's what they got. But this is a lift that was made in the U.S.
So we're going to change that to
No, we won't do foot-pounds. We will change that to horsepower. Now, let's see if they give us this. I'm sure they do. Well, I thought they did. Hey, here it is. Here it is. On page 66, if you go to the bottom of the left-hand column there, they give you this conversion. Okay? And here's what it is. It takes 746, I just saw it, watts to equal 1 horsepower. Okay? So that means a horsepower is a lot bigger than a watt. 746 times bigger than a watt. But a kilowatt would be how much? How many kilowatts is that 746 watts? 0.746. So just over 3/4 of a kilowatt is a horsepower. So those are closer to each other. Horsepower is about 3/4 of a kilowatt. Okay? So those are fairly close to each other. Watts and horsepower are nowhere close, but kilowatts are. Okay? So there's your conversion. So if we're converting this to horsepower, we'll have 2 blanks here equal blank horsepower. Now, remember how we do our conversions? Okay? The first blank is for numbers. Don't worry about them yet. Match, put the units in their place. You started with kilowatts, ending up with horsepower. What unit do you put where? Put the units in place. Say again? Kilowatts on bottom and horsepower on top. Okay? Kilowatts on the bottom and horsepower on top. Now, what numbers go with which? Oh, and I said it here, but I didn't write it down. 0.746 kilowatts is 1 horsepower. So what matches up?
1.746.
In the bottom, 0.746 kilowatts is 1 horsepower. And then what we do is divide by denominators, multiply by numerator. I can multiply by 1. I got that done. So 9.8 divided by 0.746. And what do you get? Anyone got a calculator? 9.8 divided by 0.746. Anyone got it? 9.8 divided by 0.746. Okay, they rounded just to 13. About 13 horsepower. Okay? And I guess the reason they did that was here we only had 2 digits. 9.8 is only 2 digits, so we can't round to anything more than 2 digits. So about 13 horsepower. Okay. By the way, 10 meters is pretty tall, right? Y'all got an idea of how tall 10 meters is?
It's about the size of basketball.
Oh yeah, basketball goal is 10 feet. So no, it's 10 meters is a lot more than a basketball goal. Okay, I'm about 2 meters tall. My waist is about 1 meter over the ground. If you think about doorknobs are about 1 meter over the ground, so that's about my waist level. Then I got about that much more, and then above me is about that much more because my arm is about half a yard, cubit. And you got about that much more. So this ceiling is about 3 meters high. Maybe not quite, but pretty close to it. And the building is, that part of the building is 3 stories. So that's about 10 meters. About 10 meters. The tallest part of the building over here. 3-story part. The 3-story building is 10 meters. So you're lifting this 500 kilograms, which is about half a ton, folks. Because 1,000 kilograms is a megagram, or metric ton, which is just a little bit more than our English tons. So this is close to a little over half a ton, 10 meters, 3 stories in 5 seconds. That's going to take a pretty powerful 13 horsepower lift. Okay? Now, let's do example 3.4. I'm going to erase all this because I don't think you need it anymore. A 150-pound person, what's that a measure of? Weight, which is also a, second, a force. Weight and force are measuring the same thing, just like energy and work are measuring the same thing, okay? Runs up a 15-foot stairwell, what's that a measure of? 15 feet. That's a height, or a displacement. Let's call it D because we used D before. Okay? In 10.0 seconds. Okay? 10.0 seconds is, of course, your time. Okay? What is the horsepower rating of that person running up the stairs? So we're looking for horsepower as a measure of what? Power, exactly. And what is power? That's what we're looking for here. You went through this before. Work divided by time. Very good. And what is work? Force times the displacement divided by time. You got your force, you got the displacement, you got the time. Okay? So what does that give you? What's your force? 150 pounds times displacement, 15 feet, divided by 10.0 seconds. So 15 times 150, I believe, is 2250, isn't it? Anyone got a calculator? And that's a measure of what? Foot-pounds. Foot-pounds. That's how we measure energy in the U.S. customary system, divided by 10 seconds. And that would be, I can do that one, I think. Move this decimal one place, that decimal one place, and you got 225 foot-pounds per second. Okay? Now we need to do a conversion, because it asks for not just what's the power, it says what's the horsepower. So we need to go from foot-pounds per second to horsepower. So we'll need that figure again. And what units are going to go where? Foot-pounds per second on the bottom. Okay, the whole shebang down there and horsepower on top. Okay, so these will cancel out. Okay? I'll go on and cancel them now. Okay. Now, what was our conversion? How many horsepower is in a foot-pound per second, or how many feet-pound per second in a horsepower? Which way? Horsepower? Is that what I heard? No. It's foot-pounds per second. 550 foot-pounds per second makes 1 horsepower. Okay? And again, since it's in the denominator, you divide by that. 225 divided by 550 is approximately what? Say again? It's close, but not quite. Do the math actually. 275 would be half. Okay. All right. If I take my car to the shop, he says, well, is it fixed? Close enough, you know. All right. All right. I'll remember that. Okay. All right. Anyone got a calculator? 225 divided by 550? 41? 0.41 horsepower. Let's see what they got in the book. Ooh, I'm looking at the wrong one. Oh, yeah, there it is. 0.41 horsepower. Got it. Good deal. Okay. Man, we cut this almost correctly. Well, I don't need to erase. I'm just going to advance to the next slide. Okay, we don't have long, but let's talk about motion, position, and energy. So far, we've been talking about work, and work divided by time is what? Power. Okay. Now we're going back and talking about another form of work, and this would be energy. And energy comes in many, many forms. 2 of the main ones is the energy of motion and the energy of position. Okay? Now, let's say that I had a baseball here, and I'm going to throw it. Okay? You're going to catch it, right? Okay. If I throw the baseball at you and catch it, if I what kind of energy does that have? Energy of motion. It's moving. That's called kinetic energy. Anything that's moving is kinetic. There's a whole field of kind of like biology called kinesiology, the study of motion. Okay? Now, if I have this book and Taft is going to loan me his toad, I'm going to take the book and drop it on his toad here. You don't mind too much. Not too much, you know. Unless I raise it up here and drop it on his toad. What you oh, he moved his butt. Okay, he held it out there when it was down. Okay. Why was that? The book has more energy when it's up here than it's down here. It's not because of motion. When I release it, it's going to become motion, but what it is, this is the energy of position. This is called potential energy. This is position relative to the Earth's gravitational field, gravitational potential energy. Down here it has less, up here it has more. Why? I had to do work to get it up there, right? Yeah. So that work gave it more potential energy. Okay? So that's what we're talking about. Motion, position, and energy. Energy, lots of different kinds of energy. The energy of motion is called kinetic energy. The energy of position is called potential energy. Doesn't have it yet, but it can have it once it's released. Okay? Let's see if we get the slide in. So work and energy are related. In fact, they're basically, energy is the ability to do work, okay? Whereas work is the process of changing an energy level. I changed it from a low energy level here to a high energy level there by lifting it. I did work changing the energy level. Energy, though, is the ability to do work, okay? When I was digging in the patio, I tried to eat real well, so I had plenty of energy to do the digging. Well, I overdid it. Okay. Now, next coming up will be relationship between work and the energy associated with position. What energy do we call that? Potential energy. And we'll also do the relationship between work and the energy of motion, which we call kinetic energy. Okay? That's what we'll be doing next. Okay? And we'll start with potential energy next time. Okay? So our slide will be here. We didn't get very far in 3.2, but we got a little ways. Okay. Let me erase that because I won't know which one I start at. And before you go, let me give you your labs. Okay? In fact, you don't go anywhere. Yeah, we're going to talk about conservation of energy next. Okay. Don't know if we'll finish the chapter next time or not, but we'll give it our best shot. Okay? Because I think we only have one more lab in this chapter. I may be wrong, but I think we only have one. Okay. Thank you so much. You finished? Okay, great. Okay. Okay. Now don't go anywhere because, unless you want to go to the restroom or something. Let's meet back here. Well, actually, it'd be a little easier to meet down in 259 where we were before. Not in the inner room, just in the outer room where the tables and chairs are.
What we need to leave our bags up here?
Throwing things at me. I saw that, okay? Empty of that. Empty that. Yeah, thanks so much. Okay. All right. I think I have some more of these. Okay. Whoa. All right. Y'all didn't get one. Okay. Do you deserve? No, I won't ask that question. Okay. I realized I had a few in this stack that I didn't get out. I know I got them in here somewhere. Here we go. Okay. So I'm guessing right now. Oh, let me also pause this so we don't have so much dead time. Okay. If you've read your labs, you'll see that so all the information's on front. Things we talked about: work, power, okay, horsepower, watts, okay. We're not going to use watts in this lab, by the way. What? Okay. The procedure. It says teams of 2 volunteers, you'll be 3. Okay? We'll measure the work done, the rate at which work is done, and the horsepower rating as you move up a stairwell. So it's only listing 2 people. You will have 3, so you can actually do 3 measurements. Now, one team will have 4 if Shanika gets back in time, and you can do it. So you see, you'll have a volunteer A, a volunteer B. If the third person wants to do it too, then you can write in the margin here. You can just condense these two and just have everything in one margin. You could do it over here, but it's harder to see. So, or either way, that might be easier too. So all 3 people can do it if you want. And I suggest you do it. It's pretty fun and fairly easy to do. Okay, so you'll move up a stairwell. Person A will measure and record the data for person B or whatever. Actually, I would say person C will measure for, you can just rotate it around however you want to. Okay? Now, they say we should have a bathroom scale to measure everyone's weight. I'm going to leave this up to you, okay? So you can fudge if you want to. It doesn't really matter. But you will need to put weight down. Okay, I'm glad I'm not doing it. Okay, so, and the weight you'll put down is in pounds, right? Okay, now, so that's on the first line and on page 128, your weight. And guess what? Your weight walking and running is going to be the same, right? Okay, and that's why when you do, if you do volunteer C, all you need is one weight. Okay, not going to take too much. Okay. Now, the next thing that's required here is to do the vertical height of the stairs. This is actually the first thing you're going to do. And they want it in what units? Feet. So this is a meter stick. Don't use this sign. Use this side. And how many inches make 3 feet?
36.
36. So you'll do 3 feet at a time, which won't be the whole stick. So there's 36 inches. That's 3 feet. Get it up to here, and then do 3 more feet. And then what I would do is go across here at as level of a line as you can, okay, and get here, and up there, and do 3 more feet. So count how many feet. Now, you run on to the top. I want you to see something up there. I said run on up there. Okay. Boy, pretty slow. Okay. And nobody step on the stopwatches here. Not the best place for them, but we'll be okay for now. Is he up there yet?
Yeah.
To the top. Oh. All right, good. Okay. Now, notice where your feet are there. They're not at this top ledge, are they? You have to estimate where your feet are here. So the person up there is going to do that, and you'll measure 3 more feet, and then estimate how many feet it is to the floor. Not to the top of this ledge, to the floor up there. So that's going to be a judgment call. To the nearest foot. You don't have to get it super precise, just to the nearest foot. So that's the first thing you're going to do, is determine the height of the stairwell. Now, 3 of you will be in this stairwell. 3 of you will be in the next stairwell down, the one at the end of this hall. I'll take the next 9 of you, and we'll go first to a stairwell that goes, this side of the bookstore, then the stairwell that goes to that side of the bookstore, and then the last 3 will go around to the first stairwell out. You can come through. It may be meaning obnoxious, but we're okay. I'll watch hockey up there. Okay. All right. So you'll measure that. Now, we only have 3 meter sticks, so the first 3 teams will start measuring that while I'm setting up the next 3, and then I'll run back and get the meter sticks from the first 3 and get them to the last 3. Okay? So that's why we'll go with 3. All right? You going to stay on this one?
Yeah.
Okay. A team of 3 will be here. All right. So that's the first thing you do. Now, I'm pointing out to you, that's how I say doing the measure. How they say do it, I thought was rather bizarre. They say, measure the height of each stair and then multiply them by the number of stairs. We don't know they're all the same and stuff. And this is an estimate too, but it's a lot quicker to do it this way. So that's what we're going to do here. And since you're going to be here, I'll give your team a stopwatch too. Okay? And let me remind you on the stopwatches. And this is the old ones and the newer ones. Again, start is over here at about 2 o'clock. Stop is at 2 o'clock. You need, Okay, that was 3.50 seconds. That's how you read this. Reset is over here about 10 o'clock, and that gets you back to 0. Okay? Who are going to be two other team members on two other teams? You're going to be a team? You're going to be a team. Okay? With two others. Okay? So, we aren't even close to that. I just want to get them off the stairs. Okay? All right, so you got the vertical height. You got your weight in pounds, the vertical height of the total flight here in feet. Okay? Then we're going to do the time. So I guess I'll borrow one back again. And here is a sample of walking up the stairs. Whatever pace you feel like is reasonable. Okay? But you don't stop here. I came up here so I can be the first. So if the first person down there, volunteer A, call it, the moment he or she starts, just put the first step on the thing, I start the clock. And I'll watch him or her walk up the stairs until they step on the last step, and I stop. That was 6.66 seconds. I don't know if that's reasonable or not. I was just talking. Okay, now, the next thing is going to be running up the steps. Okay? Now, here's the warning, people. I don't want you to run up the stairs as fast as you can. Nowhere close. I want you to run up the stairs as fast as you safely can. I don't want any incident reports this time. I don't want to have to be filling out paperwork through spring break week, okay? I want to be free and clear. So it's not as fast as you can, but just something faster than walking. For me, this would probably be it. Okay, you might go a little faster than that. You got to go all the way to the top. So don't wind yourself out just getting up there. But the same person here will be starting. The minute you step on that first step, you run past them, and when you step at the top, stop again. Oh, so that in 3.85 seconds. Okay, now that's just, yes, okay. And then you'll rotate around, the next person does it, and maybe the third person does it. Okay, walking, then running. At reasonable speeds. Don't run as fast as you can. I don't want any broken noses, ears, arms, legs, whatever. I don't know how you break an ear. Okay. Now, once you get all your measurements for all your people, come back to the classroom and do your calculations. That way you can ask questions if you have them. Okay? Any questions right now? Okay. Then what I'm going to do, who are my other teams? One here, one here. Okay? Now, who has the other three stopwatches? You do. Can you be on another team? Are you? Okay. Wait. Okay, make sure I got it. Okay. All right. So. Yep. This thing, right time. By this time, this one, by that time, this one, by that time, this one, by that time. Yeah, so you multiply this by that, fourth times distance, right? So that would be foot pounds. And the next will be 10 pounds per second. And the last will be horsepower. Okay? All right, were there any questions? And one time or another I was carrying around the layout. There it is. Was there a question? Meanwhile, I'm going to mark the roll again because 3:45 has passed. I feel really inattentive. Okay. I'm not tired. Okay. Okay, if you have any questions, please ask. Don't assume. Okay, say it one more time what your question was. Oh, okay, right. Okay, I was going to say this. Remember, it's more than just filling out the table here. Everybody got this? Listening? You turn back a page or two to page 126, and there's question 1 at the bottom of that page to be answered. And then, questions 2 through 5 to be answered on page 127. And you're asking about number 2 at the top of 127. Is there some limit to the height of the flight of stairs used and the horsepower developed? Now, that's a rather vague question, and here's how I interpret it. Okay, we just did 1 flight here, right? These 2 teams here could have done 2 flights. Those other 4 teams couldn't. They only had 1 flight to do. But we could have gone to Tuscaloosa and done Bryant-Denny Stadium, right? Do you think there'd be enough steps there? Do you think you could have maintained the same horsepower there?
No.
I'm not sure you could finish there. Okay, even walking there. So yeah, I think there is some limit to the height and flight of stairs used and horsepower developed. You may just run out of energy, or that's not the correct physics term to use. Run out of steam before you would run out of height of stairs. So I think that's what they meant. Okay? Any other questions? All right. What y'all feel about the lab? Was it reasonable? Okay. You ready to turn it in? Okay, making me stretch. Okay, I got it. I'll work for it. Yeah, you're worth it. Okay. Okay. Let me... Okay. All right. As you finish your labs and turn them in, if you want to, you can get started on the test. You can use 400 equation sheet, scratch paper, calculator. Okay? I'm sure you'll need scratch paper, but if you want it, you can use it. Okay? I didn't give one of you a key, did I? I don't think so. Good deal. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I've got to keep these things sort of straight here. Oh, here we go. Wondering what I did with it. Good deal. All right. Ready for that 3 of you? Okay. 1, 2. Whoa. I'll get one more. Okay. 3. Okay. Okay, just a second. Let me.
Okay.
If I don't put this down at the right place and time, I'll forget wherever I put it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Can I get
That
3 copies
3?
of the test?
Oh, you're that smart, huh?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Good
Definitely.
deal. Okay. More than that. Yeah, well, I don't have enough. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Really. All right. There goes calculators or cell phones. Okay. Ready?
Okay, Fortis.
Okay, boy. There.
I'm gonna take off.
I think that's for it. Make sure no staple stuff.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry?
Can I have a test?
Oh, okay. I thought they already got one for you. I can't hear well. Sorry.
Thank you.
Ready for the test? Oh, I forgot to call roll again. Do that before I forget again. Amber's still here. Yeah, Bailey's still here. I thought you were sitting up here. Okay. Josh is still here. Ready for the test? Is it 1 or 2? Oh yeah, she already picked up hers. Okay. Oh yeah, I see. Alexis is still here. Tyrell is still here. Wait. All right. Justin Hay did not make it in today. There it is, Tef. Okay. Tef is still here. Travis is still here. Shanika hasn't come back yet. Cole is still here. Brandon's still here. Did you have a question?
Oh yeah, on 17, do both of the balls, do they have about the same weight?
Okay, a little bit louder.
On number 17, do both of the balls have the same weight?
Okay, a cannonball and bowling ball were dropped at the same time from the top of the building. At the instant before the balls hit the sidewalk, no, they're not the same weight.
They're not?
No.
Cannonball weighs more, I guess?
Yes. I would assume so, unless it's a really small cannon. Okay. Good deal, thanks. Have a good spring break. Oh, and I want to remind everybody, please don't come to school next week. It's spring break week. I won't be here to tell you that we don't have classes. So I don't want you sitting up in the classroom too long. Okay. Gary is still here. Joseph is still here. Trey is still here. Coco didn't make it in today yet. JJ's still here, working on his 3 tests. Hannah is still here. Okay, good deal, thanks. Good deal, thank you. Oh, I shouldn't be recording all